Okay, so this is Bible study for Genesis chapter 34. And the text says, Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, had born. Let me start over. Now Dinah, the daughter Leah had born to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the land. When Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, the ruler of the area, saw her, he took her and raped her. His heart was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. And Shechem said to his father Hamor, Get me this girl as my wife. When Jacob heard that his daughter Dinah had been defiled, his sons were in the fields with his livestock, so he did nothing about it until they came home. Then Shechem's father Hamor went out to talk with Jacob. Meanwhile, Jacob's sons had come in from the fields as soon as they heard what had happened. They were shocked and furious because Shechem had done an outrageous thing in Israel by sleeping with Jacob's daughter, a thing that should not be done. But Hamor said to them, My son Shechem has his heart set on your daughter. Please give her to him as his wife. Intermarry with us. Give us your daughters and take our daughters for yourselves. You can settle among us. The land is open to you. Live in it, trade in it, and acquire property in it. Then Shechem said to Dinah's father and brothers, Let me find favor in your eyes, and I will give you whatever you ask. Make the price for the bride and the gift I am to bring as great as you like, and I'll pay whatever you ask me. Only give me the young woman as my wife. Because their sister Dinah had been defiled, Jacob's sons replied deceitfully as they spoke to Shechem and his father Hamor. They said to them, We can't do such a thing. We can't give our sister to a man who is not circumcised. That would be a disgrace to us. We will enter into an agreement with you on one condition, that you become like us by circumcising all your males. Then we will give our daughters and take your daughters for ourselves. We'll settle among you and become one people with you. But if you will not agree to be circumcised, we'll take our sister and go. Their proposal seemed good to Hamor and his son Shechem. The young man, who was the most honored of all his father's family, lost no time in doing what they said, because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. So Hamor and his son Shechem went to the gate of their city to speak to the men of their city. These men are friendly toward us, they said. Let them live in our land and trade in it. The land has plenty of room for them. We can marry their daughters and they can marry ours. But the men will agree to live with us as one people only on the condition that our males be circumcised as they themselves are. Won't their livestock, their property, and all their other animals become ours? So let us agree to their terms, and they will settle among us. All the men who went out of the city gate agreed with Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male in the city was circumcised. 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, two of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. They put Hamor and his son Shechem to the sword, and took Dinah from Shechem's house and left. The sons of Jacob came upon the dead bodies and looted the city where their sister had been defiled. They seized their flocks and herds and donkeys and everything else of theirs in the city and out in the fields. They carried off all their wealth and all their women and children, taking as plunder everything in the houses. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, You have brought trouble on me by making me obnoxious to the Canaanites and Perizzites, the people living in this land. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed. But they replied, Should he have treated our sister like a prostitute? Which has an understood answer. All right, so remember that you can download a PDF copy of this Bible study at www.abqnaz.org/alive so that you can follow along with us. And I feel like, in modern television, if this video were to show up, we watch crime dramas, and anytime there is something having to do with suicide in it, then there's a suicide prevention hotline at the end of the video. And I think similarly, if there's a rape involved, it feels like we need to have this um, um, resource for rape victims um, to be shared at the end of the video. That's kind of the way it's done nowadays. I don't have that to put up at the end of the video. This is also not primetime television. This is a Bible study. And I'll just say that for a lot of our folks, I imagine this will be a very sensitive topic. For a lot of people who may be watching this, we may know somebody that's gone through something like this, and this may be a trigger, and so I'm sensitive to that. But I want to say that I want to deal with this in a balanced manner. So, one thing that we don't have, because this is Old Testament scripture and it is for sure a male dominated society, which we are sensitive to today, but it was not the case when this was happening. That was normal, that was the way all societies were. I'll say a couple things. One, we don't have Dinah's response to this. We don't have her feelings or her sort of response, feedback on what happened, whether it is on this gentleman, no, not a gentleman, this terrible person that did this to her, or about how she felt about her brothers. Um, we don't know. It is said in the scripture that this is a rape. So the assumption is that Dinah was not complicit in any of this, that she did not desire this. Um, that's always the assumption with that word. I would say that um, in that society, um, I think that the assumption and um, the onus, or the fault would be given toward the man no matter what, because this is what I'm trying to say is this is an improper relationship, even if it wasn't rape. So they have not been married, they have not committed to each other. Um, he is not an Israelite and therefore has not been circumcised. And so I don't believe Jacob and his sons would have approved of a consensual sexual relationship between these two. So even worse, that it was apparently non-consensual. Um, and and so um, brothers protect their sister. I think we can just we're going to go through the Bible study, but I'm just trying to sort of go over some overall themes and some thoughts before we get into it, because it's just a lot to process. Um, so I mean, there's a lot. The fact that this is something that we're covering could be initially and immediately something I don't want to talk about this. Other people might respond in a way that they want to say, look, this is what the brothers did, and good riddance, and this is what was deserved. I want to really sort of process what God would have us do in this and what God would have us say. We can also just process the fact that Jacob did not do anything, and not only did not do anything, but after they had done something, said, "What are you doing? You know, you've caused us problems in this land." Um, and that in and of itself is a in our modern culture is an obviously problematic response, and maybe a response of sort of burying the problem that was something that happened in American culture for decades, I guess, and you know we that can be a trigger in and of itself. Um, but I really sort of want to focus on the thought of what God would have us do. Where is God in this? And I'll just say, first of all, that the next chapter in Genesis chapter 35, they go seek God. They go make offerings to God. They go, um, but we don't find that anywhere in chapter 34. We don't have anybody, whether it be certainly not Shechem or Hamor, but even Jacob or Jacob's sons. We really don't have anybody, it seems, seeking God. Rather, they seem to be doing what's best in their own eyes, um, sort of across the board. And the question is, was any of that what was right in God's eyes? And I think we can sort of immediately rule out certain things as not being what was right in God's eyes, and then we can sort of in our culture, in our cultural understanding of right and wrong, we can rule out some other things as being um, right in God's eyes. And I think sort of culturally, we can just about come to a place of supporting what the sons did as just, and perhaps that was um, what was right and just. This is before the law. Um, Perhaps that was what was right, but it certainly does feel vindictive and less about justice and more about revenge, which doesn't feel like something that we should affirm from God's point of view. And so it feels to me like this story is more a story of human brokenness apart from God's redemptive work than it is the story of God's redemptive work, which is what we usually look for in Scripture. So, that being said, that doesn't mean that God isn't going to get involved, but it means that He is sort of conveniently or at least conspicuously left out of this chapter. And I think that is something that is important for us to note. So let's go ahead and get into the questions. Number one, what happened in last week's Bible study? A, Jacob met Esau. Yes. B, Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. Yes. C, Esau initially declined Jacob's gift because he had plenty, but eventually accepted them. That's true. D, Jacob noted that seeing Esau, and that should be noted that seeing Esau with his favorable greeting was like seeing the face of God. That was God's involvement in that text, and ultimately, sort of him answering prayer previous to that text. E, Jacob settled in Shechem and purchased land, which sort of brings us to the text today. Now, he didn't go to live with Esau. Esau was not in what was considered the promised land, what became Israel. So we could say, and I thought about this when we were talking about last week's text, we could say, well, maybe he should have gone to live with Esau and his family and returned to his family. Or we could say, um, No, he returned to what was the promised land, in Canaan, instead of living outside of it like Esau was. So Esau did not have, he wasn't the child of promise, the child of the blessing. Jacob received the blessing, and therefore the promise that God made to Abraham and Isaac is falling on Jacob, and he should be in this area that is promised to him. But certainly living amongst the Canaanites, these, I believe they were Hivites or Hittites, um, became a problem in this text. So, number two, what happens in 34 1 through 3? Dinah, the daughter of Leah and Jacob, went out to visit the women of the land. You know, it shouldn't have been a problem, I guess. Um, Maybe she should have stayed around her own people. I don't know, but it doesn't seem like that was an overt problem. B. Shechem, the ruler's son, saw her and took her and raped her. Um, and yes, that happened. C. His heart was drawn to Dinah. He loved her and spoke tenderly to her. Let me just say, where scripture says things like this. So these are sort of quotes from scripture, but I felt compelled to put quotation marks around his heart was drawn to Dinah and he loved her. Because honestly, in today's modern world, one of the things that I think is the biggest problem when we talk about human sexuality, and marriage relationships and everything sort of surrounding that is that we confuse love with lust, and we are we think that love is a feeling that we can fall into or fall out of, apparently. And one of the things that the books that I read, was instructed, encouraged to read while my wife and I were in premarital counseling was the book called Love is a Decision. So, love is a decision to put the other person above yourself. It's a decision to prefer the needs of the other person instead of my own. That's love. And that's, if I love God, that's what that looks like. I put God's desires and needs above my own. If I love a person, Maverick, stop it. Give me a moment. Hey, sorry, my dog chewing on my sweatshirt. Um, so, so that's what love is. Love is preferring the needs of somebody else above my own, putting them above me. And that's not what Shechem did. Um, so, if indeed this was rape and not consensual, as it is stated, then what he did was not preferring her above himself. And therefore, I don't see love in it. I see lust. When I see his heart was drawn to her, I think, no, it wasn't. He's confused. His penis was drawn toward her. Excuse me, I should have probably warned you that that was coming. But I just want to be frank, that we are confused in our culture and our society about what love is. And I don't want to reinforce that incorrect thinking about love by, you know, not addressing that here in Scripture. Um, so if he did truly love her and this was a consensual experience that was not according to their family's customs and God's will, um, then perhaps we could say these words are proper, but then we need to take away the word rape from this because that's not what it was, if this. But my my thinking is that it was rape, and therefore it was not love, and it was not his heart, because nobody would do that to a person that they loved. There. So D, Shechem said to his father, "Get me this girl as my wife." So I believe Hamor and Shechem are used to getting what they want in their land. And so he said, "Go get me this girl," which seems like a step out of order. That's what should have happened first if that was his desire and if he really loved her. But that's not what happened. So, what happened in 34:5? Jacob heard that Dinah had been defiled. Yes. B, his sons were in the fields. Yes. C, so he did nothing about it. Yes. Until they came home. And I would say, even once they came home, he did not do anything about it really. So the until they got home was perhaps generous to Jacob, but then even after they did something about it, he is not all that excited about what they did. So, number 4, what happened in 34, 6, and 7? Um, A, Shechem's father went out to talk to Jacob. Yes, that happened. B, Jacob's sons had come in from the fields as soon as they heard what happened. Yes. And C, Jacob's sons were shocked and furious. Yes, obviously. Those seem like, yeah, duh, you know. Number 5, what did Hamor say in 34, 8 through 10? A, my son has his heart set on your daughter. Yes. B, please give her to him as his wife. Yes, he said that. C, intermarry with us. Give us your daughters and take our daughters for yourselves. He said that. And then D, settle in our land. So here's what's important to understand is even if we don't find God in this text, I would say that this is something that God has specifically talked to Abraham about, and that then Isaac and Rebekah have sent Jacob away to get a wife from the land of their fathers. So um, this doesn't seem like a proposal that's proper. This doesn't seem like something that they would ever agree to if they were following God. So I think that we can sort of confidently from both before this in Genesis, that God's commands and God's will, as well as after this when they settle in the land and receive the law, we can confidently say that this is not the will of God, this proposal from Hamor. Um, and then D, settle in our land. So, and let me go a step further to say, sort of for application purposes for our life, that one of the biggest mistakes that Shechem has raped Dinah and then said, "I want her for my wife. Dad, go get her. Whatever we got to do." And so they're willing to sort of merge their peoples, which, by the way, is common to have a daughter and a son. I mean, even in fairy tales in sort of European history, the children of kings marry each other, and there is a sort of treaty amongst them that comes from that. So we've sort of, whether they fully merged their peoples, they've certainly made a connection through that. So this would not be unheard of historically. After this time, this was sort of the way things happen quite often. But they're inviting them to sort of be a part of their people, that this would just be sort of a first step. And let me just say that I think it's important for us to know that making things right after the fact does not excuse misbehavior before. What I mean by that is, so, historically in America, you know, somebody slept together, they were having a baby, and therefore do the honorable thing was the thought and get married, which is a marriage based on, first of all, lust and then duty, and not on a decision to put the other person above myself. Now, maybe duty is that, but if it's forced on you by somebody else, by the family, by society, by culture, probably not going to work out. So I've seen that go poorly and end in divorce and broken families, and so that was kind of the way Americans had, not in situations of rape, I don't think, but in situations of consensual premarital sex that ended up with consequences of pregnancy. We've seen, oh, you just get married. I had a couple who started their relationship as an affair come to me and say, Pastor, will you marry us? We feel God's put us together. And I said, no, I won't do that. Because it's clear to me that you think that me performing this little ceremony and you taking some vows makes what you already did all right. It sort of confirms this as in the will of God. And let me just say that going and getting married after you've, you know, um, put your own selfish desires and lusts before the will of God and before the good of that other person doesn't make things right. Um, in fact, it just compounds the mess, I think, usually. So it kind of feels like that's what Hamor and Shechem are doing. Like, okay, let's make all this right. And it doesn't really say ever, I don't think, that Hamor knew what had happened otherwise. Um, but he just knows that his son loves this girl and he's trying to negotiate that. So what does Shechem say in 34, 11, and 12? So in 11 and 12 it says, let me find favor in your eyes and I will give you whatever you ask. So that, Hamor is offering, sort of combining peoples. Shechem is talking to the brothers and say, I'll give you anything. Like, basically, just ask and you can have whatever you want in trade for your sister. So how did Jacob's sons reply according to 34, 13, and 17? Well, this says E, but it should be A on this next question. Because their sister had been defiled, they replied deceitfully to Shechem and Hamor. So they knew what had happened, and they have a plan, and so they agree to something that is clearly not God's will, but they don't intend on going through with all this anyway. They're replying deceitfully. And then F, which is really B, they told him that nobody can marry Dinah or any other woman without being circumcised. And G, they agreed to the proposition only if their land becomes circumcised. So they say, yes, okay, only if everybody in your land becomes circumcised, then we can become one people, which sort of from God's perspective, if circumcision is a sign of the covenant, does actually make sense. Would actually be the sort of thing that made it okay for them to intermarry, I think, that basically they would convert to serve the God of Israel. Um, Sort of in the future, that is the thing that changes things. It's not so much about race and people groups as it is about the God that they serve, and therefore, if they became, even if they were foreigners in the land and they became circumcised, it sort of changes the ball game there. So that is sort of a reasonable expectation and thought, according to even the law later on. Number 6, how did Hamor and Shechem respond according to 34:18 through 24? A, the proposal seemed good, which to me, that is just like confounding and miraculous all in and of itself. That they said, you're going to get, and they were like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. No, that doesn't sound like a good idea. How are they going to propose this to everybody else in the nation? Shechem wasted no time because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. What you would do for a woman, that's something. He circumcised himself. Um, Anyway, see, Hamor and Shechem went to the gate of their city to speak to the men of their city. D, they convinced them by explaining that it would be beneficial to them because Jacob's family was prosperous, and the men all agreed. So they went and said, look, he's got a lot of stuff. Everything that's his is going to become ours because we're intermarrying. So, our children, our grandchildren will be their grandchildren and inherited, and they will be. I mean, in some ways, they're not stealing it from them; they're combining, and it becomes that. But it was a beneficial deal for them. Look, this is great. We're gonna get all the stuff that they have, and yes, it will be a combined people, but we'll have all that stuff in addition to our stuff. So they convinced them, and the men all agreed to be circumcised. What we won't do for stuff, I guess. Um, what happened next, according to 34, 25 through 29? 25 through 29. 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers. So remember that the sons of Jacob are all brothers, but there's different mothers. And so Simeon and Levi are the full blood brothers of Dinah. And they took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. So they killed everybody while they were in pain because they had been circumcised. So they're not moving very swiftly. They're not fighting at their full potential. And they're just killed unsuspectingly. B, they put Hamor and Shechem to the sword and took Dinah from Shechem's house. So killed the king and his son and took their sister back. And then the sons of Jacob, it says, when they came upon the dead bodies, so the sort of understanding, I think, would be it would be the other sons of Jacob who had not done this now join in when they see all these dead bodies, and they seize the flocks and the herds and the donkeys and everything else in the city and out in the fields, and carried away their wealth and their women and children, and took everything from their houses. So they became one people, but without all the men, because all the men were dead. So this, like I said, as you read this text, it kind of feels in our modern culture, it feels like justice. And perhaps it feels like, I mean, I think we get confused a little bit between revenge and justice sometimes. So it could be considered justice, even I think in the law at some level, but I'm not sure. The difference between justice and revenge is certainly in the heart of the person. Number 8. How did Jacob respond according to 34:30? So his response was, "You brought trouble on me." So he's not obviously worried about the folks from this area because the men are all dead. They're not going to fight him. But he says, what about the rest of the Canaanites and Perizzites in this land if they join forces to come? If they say, look what they did to Shechem, won't they do that to us too? We need to join forces and attack them and get them out of there. So that's what Jacob's saying. Is he's saying, now we're obnoxious to them. Now we weren't a problem, but we can't overcome all of them together. So then how did Simeon and Levi reply according to 34:31? It says, but they replied, should he have treated our sister like a prostitute? With the understood answer of no, and we sort of end this text without an answer. We see Jacob's point, I think, but at this point, sort of Simeon and Levi have the more principled answer, I think. Jacob is more practical. I don't want to be attacked and destroyed by um, these groups banding together. And his sons say, yeah, but this was wrong. And we dealt with the thing that was wrong. So then it says, what do you think? Because it kind of ends like this. And I would say uh, that Justice would be appropriate. Revenge is not the thing that God would call us to do. Um, and it's hard to tell where God was in any of this because it doesn't say that they were actually seeking God. Um, in the next chapter, they go to Bethel, and uh, there is um, some talk to God about His faithfulness to them and Him taking care of them, um, and so maybe God gets more involved at that point. But and I think the only way we know what is right in any of this, I mean, there's some things that we say are certainly wrong, and then there's some things that we consider wrong culturally, but the only way we can know what is truly right is to know what God thinks about it in this moment. Because, like I said, the difference between justice and revenge is often only in the heart of the person. How do we know whether this is righteousness, whether this was right justice and punishment as should be, or whether it was somebody taking their enemy into their own hands instead of leaving them in God's hands? Um, and I think that's something to be considered. This is a tough text, and so I would say if you're struggling with any part of it, go to prayer and allow God to reveal to you um, where righteousness is and where His place is in this struggle.